I'm sure, Peter, that if there's any deleterious effect on the programming, we'll become aware of it. The fact is that Facebook is wonderfully successful in disseminating other people's work. And I'm sure the management of the ABC, whether it was Michelle Guthrie or Mark Scott before, would have said, does this get ABC content in front of more people? It's badged as ABC content. A lot of people are accessing it through Facebook. Every other media outfit is doing that. We must be there as well. So it's in a sense strategic and is protective, and your ABC is exposed to the Facebook audience. I don't have a particular problem with it. There's big things happening for advertisers who are having their advertising on Google and YouTube placed along content, placed beside content which is unacceptable to them. It might be tobacco or alcohol or any sort of other gambling. Gambling is huge now in all media. Australia is a really big. A lot of people gamble here. About one of the biggest per capita gambling revenues in the world, according to The Economist, an article I read recently. So as soon as we hear of there's deleterious effects about the ABC's content being on Facebook, that should become apparent. Facebook gathers everybody's content, and there's been a great argument about the piracy of, particularly from media outfits that are trying to construct paywalls and subscriber base. And for commercial media, I wanted to survive because it employs a lot of content creators for all the right reasons. Any piracy or ripping off other people's work is really a theft of their right to earn an income from that work. In the ABC's case, it's paid for by the taxpayers. We want to get it out to everybody, so I don't see an ideological difficulty. If one emerges, well, that'll become apparent.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, next question. Go for it, Ollie.
Hilary. My name is Hilary. I just wanted to ask a question basically on the two Guthries. Has any other candidate for the board been appointed without and sidestepped all the selection criteria, and what made them decide to do that? That's for Vanessa Guthrie, was she's outstanding or whatever. That's Vanessa Guthrie. And as far as Michelle Guthrie is concerned, with this idea of flattening management and putting the money into content, broadly speaking, do you think that's the right direction to go?
On Vanessa Guthrie, I don't know. I haven't had a chance to talk to Mitch Fifield. Why did you do that? It's provocative, and it raises an eyebrow, to put it mildly. The fact that she's from the Minerals Council raises an eyebrow as well. That's not to say that people from with experience, broad experience in the Australian economy shouldn't be there. The government seems to prefer technologists rather than educators or people in the arts or culture, even though we're arguing the ABC's got to be a huge force in Australian culture as well as national identity. So I always give the new board members, including Janet Albrechtsen, the benefit of the doubt when they get on board the ABC. Janet, of course, has never ceased to bag the ABC, or doesn't acknowledge that her eyes have been opened about what it does and its benefits and its justification. It's always to put the boot in. Likewise, Maurice Newman, other patronage appointments to the ABC. So it's a pattern of stacking of the ABC board with ideologues and party political operatives. I'm not saying Vanessa Guthrie is that. She's from Western Australia. It could be that Mitch Fifield says, look, she's from WA and we need one. It can't be Sydney centric. I agree. That's a good reason to appoint somebody from WA, an appropriately qualified person from WA. That could be the reason. And they might get a bit of a political benefit out of it to the Liberal Party base. So what are you talking about? You think we condone all these lefties in the air? Just imagine what goes on in the back rooms of the Liberal National Party, in the paranoias that they build up in the adversarial game, which is so sickening. It's so pathetic. Left wing, right wing. It's just an old Cold War terminology. It's no longer relevant to the debate and about where economies go. So they may well say that they play up to the paranoia of the Liberal Party, National Party base to say we put a pro-coal person on. But as I said, she'll be bound by the ABC's editorial policies, which have been endorsed by Janet Albrechtson, Ron Brunton, Morris Newman, Keith Windshuttle, and various other notables, Michael Kroger, Donald McDonald, who've been put on the board in the age of board stacking. So the other point was the
broadly speaking, Michelle Guthrie's approach is
20 an hour, get in the paper. It's absolutely pathetic.
do you think it's the right direction to focus more on the content?
Look, you have to stay in the game, you have to have content. And in many ways, my judgment is, yes, that's one way to go. It's a tragedy that's come at the expense of the staff. She's given up the ghost on international broadcasting. It disappears. It disappears. I mean, our international broadcasting is a website, and it's brokered various things that have come in from those foreign correspondents we've got. But remember, when Julie Bishop canned the Australian network contract with DFAT, it was we lost about 6 or 8 in situ correspondents in the region, of Asia Pacific region. The bulk of our Asian neighbours are accessing content on their mobile phones, 3 billion of them. And for Australia to project itself as a liberal democracy where media does have the capacity to bring government to account, particularly through the ABC, it's absolutely vital that we project ourselves into the region as a liberal democracy. Now, since we were withdrawn, China, you talk about China, China is in is everywhere. It's in Fiji, it's right through Southeast Asia, it's in Papua New Guinea, not so much Indonesia at the moment, but their influence is growing. So our important part of engaging with our region has been destroyed by Julie Bishop's unilateral decision to can the DFAT contract. And Michelle Guthrie has quietly said, well, what's the use, unless we can do something distinctive in international, what's the use of it? So it's now just Radio Australia rip and read and a bloody website. The board significantly Hillary has determined, I think it's more National Party influence than any great concern about Sydney centrism. In the announcement that she made, there would be 80 content creators go to the regions of Australia, journalists and programmers. That is an acknowledgement of the board that Sydney centrism is a major problem in the ABC's editorial leadership and judgments, and the fact that some of the money released goes to regionalism is very good. But they're not restoring current affairs, state-based current affairs. They're putting out, I'm sure there'll all be wonderful people applying themselves in regions, but that was a judgment they made. Didn't do anything about international, because that's you make these very difficult resourcing decisions. That's a very hard decision for them to make. What bang do we get out of that for Australia? Wish we could, but we can't. It'd be better for Australia to put more money into regions. and that's a call that anybody in that position would, it's unexceptional, and they're not hardball about it. Because, and we're waiting for the next annual report to come out later this year, the board will have to determine, as I said, it's a statutory obligation to put up its hand if they don't think there's sufficient resources to do all the things that the ABC Act requires. So I thought, under the circumstances, it was fair enough.
It's very grim.
The man with the microphone's got possession of the law.
Ollie, you give it to the one you're giving the call to, but you should see these other hands. Yeah.
Oh, thanks very much, Quentin. Jim McElroy is my name, and I lived in Brisbane for a long time, and I used to enjoy watching your 7:30 report. What was it called then?
7:30 report.
Yeah, 7:30 report. I also would like to say that I was presently surprised to hear that you're the editor of New Daily. I really like the New Daily, and I'll give it a plug here for people to get. It's a really informative program. But my question is, or prelude is this constant pressure on the ABC socialists, the lefty ABC, and all sorts of things launched by the right wing of the Liberal Party, and all these commentators from the Murdoch press and so on. I mean, I don't know, it's my opinion that it is having an impact, and that there is a shift to the right in the ABC's editorial tone. I notice that in a whole lot of programs. Maybe it's because the whole debate has gone so far to the right that the ABC's just sort of dragged along a little bit with it. But I was particularly incensed, as I mentioned to you, about the foreign correspondent program the other night about Venezuela. That was an absolute travesty and a piece of State Department propaganda. Do you think, my question is, do you think that this constant barrage of propaganda against the ABC from the right-wing ideologues in the Murdoch press and in the government and the Tony Abbott wing is having an impact? Is it actually pushing imperceptibly and not even necessarily consciously the ABC in a rightward direction?
Look, yes, that sort of vilification can be wearing, and your concern about self-censorship or making judgments that you know will be non-controversial, non-contentious, is a difficulty. The only thing you as an ABC supporter can do is to take issue with the program or journalist who broadcast material that you find is factually incorrect or not fair or objective. That's the only standard you can bring. As a journalist, I've said in my work on the ABC, and the audience haven't hesitated to let me know when I've stuffed things up or I made a factual error. Most ABC people rightly have a sense of ownership of it. I'm paying your bloody salary, mate. And I've always found that it is better to shape up to that criticism and say, well, where have I got it wrong? You tell me. Where's the fact wrong? Where have I misinterpreted these events and misrepresented it? And you have to intellectually face up to it and say, oh shit, I did make a mistake there, and you have to correct. You have to acknowledge if you made a mistake. A good journalist will say, oh, thank you, you've raised a point that I missed. So the only thing that I can say, Jim, in answer to this is Eric Campbell's piece on foreign correspondent on Venezuela. The only thing I can suggest is that you make contact with the program and with the journalist preferably, and constructively say, mate, you missed this point or that point. Doesn't matter where he might say, well, you've got a leftist bias, or I don't think he would say that. It doesn't matter left, right, you know. I'm pissed off with these terms It's a question of what is the factual accuracy and the interpretations that can be drawn from that, and the editorial judgments you bring to bear on that. I just read this article, and the point that I got from the article was the Venezuelan economy being so impacted by low oil prices that the programs implemented weren't as fast to improve the lot of the Venezuelan population. I picked that up from that critique of Eric's program. If you put that to Eric, he would have to defend himself and say, well, we considered that, or we missed that major point of the macros of the difficulty that particular government was having, acknowledging that it was a revolutionary government, and the revolution hasn't delivered for all the reasons that anybody who studies South America would know. So I don't know if that helps Jim overcome that. If ABC people are fair dinkum, they will listen to legitimate criticism and answer it, and that'll impact on it. I've found it very helpful for my work as a journalist in the ABC, and whenever I've spoken to the ABC staff, I said that's the attitude we must have, is to correct factual inaccuracy and correct the record and make sure our interpretations stay. You learn a lot. Your character as a journalist, you get a lot of that from experience. A lot of this could be inexperience. Young people just don't know, haven't read widely enough. As you shout at the television, as we can, you've missed that point. As you shout at the television, just think this journo doesn't know about that, this program maker doesn't know. You can make contact with them and tell them. And hopefully people won't be so defensive that they can't allow themselves to be held to account.
Okay.
Thanks, Quentin. It's Richard Archer. We're coming out in the wet night like this. Yes, it's very easy to get depressed about the direction of the ABC, and for example, I try and avoid ABC breakfast.
On television?
Radio.
On television. Yeah.
What about you listen to Fran, or?
No, I'm thinking of the television.
Yeah, sure, right. So you go on the Sunrise, do you?
Yeah. I have to. No, I actually go on a rager or something else like that. The question I have is on a more slightly positive note, is just what. Well, actually two questions, but I'll start with the first one, and that's what other models do you see overseas that present, let's say, a more optimistic or productive or constructive way that the ABC may, follow up in its capacity to fulfill its remit and all that? Is there? We've seen declines you've mentioned already in the NZBC and CBC and others. Is there, are there some bright lights out there?
The public broadcasting model all around the world's under threat. We're lucky to be recipients of the Reithian model from the UK, where later Lord Reith was able to determine, when he got into a fight with the then British government, to say this is the remit. We are independent. That's what the licence payers in the UK pay for, and that's really assisted the public broadcasting model that went all around the world, well, to various other countries. But it requires great leadership inside an organisation to hold to that institutional strength. For governments to put advertising, make the broadcaster take advertising, is the major compromise and corrupting compromise of the public broadcasting model. Interesting, in some cases it hasn't been done on radio. You can get from the Commonwealth Broadcasting Union a full list of the status of public broadcasting around the world. We're very lucky in Australia, and the UK, even with the government there, the David Cameron government putting the boot into BBC funding, it'll survive Cameron and Theresa May as long as it can maintain its audiences and its programming. So The key to it is to have leaders of the institution capable of restating its public purpose, and refer back to Lord Reith, its independence, and the capacity of its journalists and its programs to call government to account. We could go Communist China, which is a very effective autonomous body, as you know. It's effective government, apparently. It can close coal mines. It can order whole cities to be demolished and people moved in one go. You might like that particular model, because of its effectiveness. But we're still surviving within a democracy and with all the influences. Does that help answer your question? So it's not positive. You're trying to be positive, as am I, but it's under threat. So it's a case of restating its purpose, even with a digitally disrupted world. The digital revolution is changing everything. You could we'll put up an argument, we don't need the ABC anymore. You can get anything. You can get anything. You get The Guardian, you get the Washington Post and the New York Times, you can get anything you like. But I'm arguing that a place like Australia needs something that is a cohesive force, a mainstream force, and influence in national identity. National identity is still important, and multiculturalism, in the case of SBS, is still important for a country like Australia. So you have to argue from where we are in the country and the public. You have got public broadcasting in Indonesia and all the countries of Southeast Asia, but they're government controlled. What has evolved here is the question of independence through its government structures. Does that help?
I was looking for perhaps a brighter light than that, but just if there are so many overseas models that are suggested.
We're the best.
No, we're unique in that sense. The BBC is still very strong, and the BBC in Asia and China, the BBC has got a lot of commercial outfits in its international broadcasting, but the BBC hasn't allowed itself to be compromised in its journalism. And it's done some very, very good work.
Okay, thanks.
Greg is my name, and my question goes to the phenomenon of fake news that seems to be so prevalent around the place at the moment, and it seems to me now with the plethora of news agencies, you've mentioned a couple, and on the whole they're quality news agencies, but that's not the problem. The problem to me seems to be the way that Donald Trump tweets some sort of nonsense and it becomes truth because
He said it.
Lots of people read it. And my question really is, how does the ABC guard against that? And what do they do in response to fake news? And you know, is it part of the ABC to educate? So, fake news.
Yes, I did a piece for the New Daily where I'm not the editor, I'm the contributing editor. I write a piece a week. I've just written one about Mark Latham and shock jockery on Sky News. The fake news became a phenomenon through the US presidential election and where Zuckerberg and Facebook allowed algorithmic clicks to determine what went up to the top of the most viewed, and the algorithm determined. And if you got some of this fake news was very funny, it was very satirical and sometimes very clever, but also bullshit, like Hillary Quentin procuring child molesters and various other things. But all of a sudden people would click on that, and Zuckerberg allowed the algorithms from that to build up where it went viral, and he allowed false accounts of Facebook to be allowed onto the Facebook global distribution system. So there were some smart operators in Macedonia who got all in one cluster apparently. They created very plausible looking US looked like US news websites and created plausible names for them, and then created a whole raft of fake material which went viral. A lot of it did. And that Steve Bannon guy, who's now working with Donald Trump, he said, and I think it's quoted in the piece I wrote, he said if the Trump campaign didn't have a great investment in its social media and Facebook exposure and advertising and what have you, as well as the benefits of fake news, he wouldn't have signed up for the Trump campaign. I think they spent more on advertising on Facebook. As the algorithm went up, the ads went onto the successful sites. They spent more on Facebook advertising to get to those eyeballs as much as network television, primetime network television, which used to dominate. You put all your investment into network television. So Zuckerberg is having to change the rules and to try to restore some credibility. It's all too late. The other thing was, and I think there's some recent articles about this, is that because there was such a huge smear of Hillary Clinton, that kept a lot of Americans away. America doesn't have compulsory voting as we do in Australia. I noticed the US ambassador in his last, Obama's US ambassador going back to the United States after the presidential election said, there's one thing I've learned that we could learn from Australia, and that is compulsory voting. That would change the nature of politics in the United States. So it's an ongoing problem. The responsibility for journalists, including the ABC, particularly with improved media consciousness in the digital revolution, is to expose the fake news and to say this is part of a disinformation and a misinformation. Try to run it down and report it like a news story. This is fake news done for these reasons. It's like slush funding. Where does the money come from to buy the policy that they're getting from whatever political party? Who are the funders? Who's behind this? So it's a piece of journalism, and that is to write up to your audience and say this is the way this influence was impacted, and where the source of it's coming from. And now that we've got the phenomenon of fake news up, and that is to spike it. It becomes just another challenge for every responsible and committed journalist and institutions like the ABC. Media Watch, Paul Barry did a very good piece on fake news at the time as well. So that's infinitely Googleable, so people who want to inform themselves about the phenomenon can go straight to it. But spike it, point it out, report it is the only response we can get to those manipulations.
I've got a question which may
Just your name.
Oh, sorry. My name is Paul Reddy. I'm asking really a general journalistic question. What Kantvar was on Q&A, he is a former news director of Al Jazeera, I think is an Egyptian. He said something along the lines that it is the responsibility of journalists to put whatever it is that they are saying into context, and by implication coloring whatever story that one is putting with the journalist's political interpretation of that context. What do you think of that, and did you see that episode, and did you come to the same conclusion as I did?
Al Jazeera has, like the ABC, has its faults as well, but Al Jazeera has done some very good work. You acknowledge that. You can go into specific cases where it's stuffed up, got things cocked up or what have you, was misinformed.
It was really about that specific point.
The context is part of journalism. In that sense, he's dead right. And if you don't say why am I highlighting this, and where does it come from, and take the audience into your right up to the audience. So this is the context. this is the timeline, these are the factors, and to try to demonstrate that you've considered every factor which allowed you to come to this declaratory paragraph or sentence or statement to camera, or the newsreader concluding what's this story about, you haven't done your work as a journalist. So even if you go back to the birth to the start of time, you have to say this is the context of it. So they say journalism is the first rough draft of history. If you have that in mind, where you are in the timeline of things, and you have the broadest, you need a lot of experience and readership to make that, and good journalists get up to that stage, because people start to say, this guy's got the context, this journalist has got the context right, and therefore the material that they're about to present to us is much more valuable and credible.
So far, you and I agree absolutely. And then Mark Day responded that context, my understanding of the context, your understanding of the context, is really subjective. It is coloured by your knowledge.
Well, it's what I was talking about earlier, editorial judgment. Yes. Editorial judgment. Jim Spiegelman, when he was on the ABC, got some external operators to come in and invited them in to do what he called random audits of bias in the ABC. And I said, Jim, why are you doing this? This is a daft idea. We're already held to account by the code of practice, which is externally administered. It's not self-regulated by the ABC, it's externally done, so anybody can complain. Jim up there can complain about Eric's report on Venezuela. Chris Uhlmann's under investigation under the complaint handling process about the South Australian renewables. He'll have to defend himself. I've been under complaint. I've said I've done it for these reasons. I wrote it this way because, and give a because. Whatever the deadline pressure you're under, all sorts of mitigating circumstances in your reporting. Those things will come out. So that's the important element to keep everybody on the ball as far as what they're doing and their responsibilities, not just to the ABC but to the audiences and to journalism itself.
But shouldn't journalists simply say, an ethical journalist, these are the facts, and given my current knowledge, this is my understanding of the context. If it is
by all means, that is an aid to understanding where you come from.
As opposed to colouring the story.
If you embellish, that affects your credibility. If you explain why you've come to these conclusions and the sources that have influenced your decision, everybody can make a judgment about them.
But isn't that responsible journalism?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Even the contributors to Green Left Weekly hopefully would be doing that. And some do. Some, of course, gild the lily, and some lay on a bit of a propaganda element, as happens in the Murdoch press.
Hang on, Paul. That's enough, probably. Who's the next question?
Thank you, Quentin, for tonight's speech. Graham Fowler's my name. My query is to do with backing the ABC and money, and how the ABC will approach the matter of sport with respect to getting audience. From a beginning in the early days of television, where ABC was the only group interested in televising sport, the prices for sport now are astronomical, the wages are astronomical, all the rest of it. What do you think is the best way for ABC to proceed?
The ABC is doing that is women's sport. The ABC is doing outside broadcast and highlighting women's sport. You're right, the ABC used to be cricket, World War III, we unite them, then cricket, and then golf. Look, you're right. In this commercial world, particularly with gambling now being a big factor in monetising, if you've got a fan base, you've got a business. And for the individual, the major codes of football, for example, we've got a huge fan base, and now they're worth in subscription television. That's why Rupert and Foxtel and Fox News, Fox Sports wants exclusivity over major codes. You get the codes, you get the subscribers that came. Sky B was built on that success in the United Kingdom, and they paid premium prices for soccer in the United Kingdom, and they built their business on the soccer. Here, the ABC, because of the commercialisation of sport, the ABC is now out of television broadcasting of cricket. Fortunately, it's still in radio. You can listen to the ABC's cricket coverage on radio. But everything else has, once it built up a fan base, it's off to commerciality. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on what's happening with women's sport, but I think women's sport is building up its own substantial fan base, and it may well be commercialised. So these codes, women's codes, may well deliver a substantial fan base and business plan for the women to start making some money out of sport. That'd be, depending on what you think, that'd be a good thing. The only downside is that with the gambling dollar, you have to endure television on Fox Sports, which has after a commercial break, you've got to say, will you bet on the outcome of this? Now, I don't want to be a Presbyterian, but that's going to be a big influence. And now you get drugs in sport, and you get game fixing and all those other corrupting influences for what should be a wonderful human activity. So the ABC's out of those major games, never to go back into television, into cricket, all the other big fan base things. But strategically, I'm glad to see the ABC putting whatever effort it can, resources it can, into the development of women's sport. The ABC was very good in orchestral performances. Post-war, we had for a country with 6 million people post the Second World War, we had 6 symphony orchestras. We've still got 6 symphony orchestras. They were funded with part of the ABC. Now the ABC still has broadcast arrangements with all those orchestras. Now we've got a population of 25 million. You think where the ABC had come with orchestral performances, all the beautiful musicians and the Conservatorium of Music that have really been helped. This is the cultural contribution of the ABC. And it's been hard going, but we have a critical mass of musicians in this country and music lovers, and onwards to opera, and the ABC can't afford to stage operas, but we can do cooperative arrangements with others. So has that helped?
Okay, next question.
I'm Carolyn Allen. I'll make a comment about the sport thing. ABC has never really done netball, which is played by more people than any other team.
Is that right? No live coverage of netball?
They did some live coverage of tests, but not regular weekend stuff.
Did you kick them in the shins for not doing it?
No, I guess I should kick them in the shins more, which comes to the first comment I wanted to make. Was I listen to, since I've retired and I'm home in the daytime, I tend to listen to Radio National. And something really annoys me is a program called Counterpoint with Amanda Vanstone. And she repeatedly makes gross comments about public servants and welfare recipients.
Have you complained and taken her
program? Does she have to stand up to the accountability of the journalists?
Oh yes.
So I should complain.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just feel like crashing my radio across the room.
Well, that'd be counterproductive. Satisfying but counterproductive. The answer is you should complain and say, Amanda said this, and
so I need to write down what she said.
You need to
always re-listen anyway, but she frequently says it.
And
she puts down people with disabilities, anyone on welfare, public servants, like she makes these asides in a nice manner, not aggressively like Mark Latham. No, but she says it to me the way. But anyway, I've just pointed
The only thing, you should do all that. The only thing, since I've been at the New Daily, is what would have been a current affair or the Murdoch press attack on welfare recipients. That seemed to have countered. This is a strength of social media. Let me put this to you as an observer of media. The Centrelink, Not My Debt, where they sent out all these letters with looked as though there was a bill and scared the hell out of a lot of Centrelink recipients. A lot of these Centrelink recipients are articulate, bright people, and they put their hand up, and they eventually got onto mainstream media outfits, including the ABC covered it, of course, and it just pointed out that these bills that they were getting were false. And they'd go back, and they were meant to be comparing ATO figures with them, and that was a counter-attack, not a counter-attack, but a countermeasure produced by social media. And all of a sudden the real story got out, that this was a revenue gouge designed by various debt collections agencies that helped the department, got the department to move that situation. So that was a major element of a failure of Centrelink. Have I helped you on the question about Amanda?
Well, that's not the main question I wanted to ask you.
Ask your question.
Goes back to the beginning where you said that there's now going to be lots of people sacked and 50 million that goes to content and program development. Is that putting, like often in public, and I've been a public servant, is that putting the cart before the horse instead of the horse first? So that will everything, and what percentage difference is that compared to what was previously spent? Does that mean that someone has to come up with an idea for a program, and then maybe the same employees will be used in doing the research, the sound, the direction and the production?
I don't know is the answer. My eyebrow is sceptically raised as yours is of exactly what's going to be commissioned. I want to see the commissioning criteria. I want to see how much of that blood money, it is blood money in the sense of it's come off the redundancies of all these people, how much goes outside the ABC to other operators. I think there's a strong case for it all to be used inside the ABC. The trouble with co-productions is that you give away your archival right to the material produced that doesn't go into the ABC archive as an ongoing asset to the ABC, can be used by other program makers. A big downside to that, which has been raised with the Senate, raised with the government. So I don't know is the answer to your question. So we'll all have to watch over the next 12 months or so to see what actual, she said extraordinary content would be created, distinctive content. Agree with the strategy, but let's see the execution.
Okay, next question.
There's one.
Holly? Way at the back. Way at the back.
I
don't know if he's really serious, that guy. And be careful with him. Hold it up to you.
First let's ask about computers and what mobile or whatever. How do we between old-fashioned
telephone?
Yeah, Australia Post still operational, sir, and you can put in a letter. Send it to the managing director. Don't worry about audience liaison. Send it to the managing director, Vanessa Guthrie, and she'll have to respond.
Okay. PO Box 9999, which is the Don Bradman average in cricket in New York, capital city. Okay, is there any other questions? I've got one more, and you've got one more. Somebody right at the start of the night said to, why don't you ask Quentin, has he heard of any idea to sell the Ultimo headquarters of the ABC, you know, in the great privatisation rage?
No. Even if it was, it'd require decision of the board and alternative accommodation.
They just lease it back.
Although, they could, but that's what happened to the transmission.
That's what happens.
That's what happened to the transmission. It's owned by a Canadian super fund.
Yeah.
The transmission is a guaranteed income from the transmission costs, digital transmission costs of SBS and the ABC. I raised that with technology people inside the ABC at the time, and they said, well, we get a little bit more control over that because they have to deliver, and if there are transmission difficulties, there can be penalties that we can apply to them. When it was government owned, I said, but why is it, I love Canadians, but why are the Canadians operating and not the mums and dads through their super fund of Australia if we wanted to create capital? Anyway, I don't want to get involved into the privatisation of the electricity industry, which is another huge
story.
debate that you could have at politics in the pub. But no, I haven't heard of it, and the only thing to make money out of Sydney real estate at the moment, Peter, is residential, and you'd have to remake the whole of the Ultimo building after throwing us all out.
Okay, thanks very much. Anyone else? Yourself, Ollie? You're okay?
Yeah. Back to fake news. With the speed and the say the salacious or the sensational or whatever hook is used to get an awful lot of people clicking on this, reading it, it seems that the fact check has trouble keeping up. It seems that the rate at which the fake news is generated is such, and the uptake is such, and the actual fact checking is not read by anything like the same proportion of the readership. We seem to be playing catch up all the time, and fake news has got this advantage.
It's entertaining. It can be entertaining and voyeuristic and engaging, so it's a phenomenon. Look, Alan Kohler, this is, those graphs he has, he says in the digital revolution, for a journalist to substantiate a salary of $100,000 a year, they would need to have 200,000 hits on their articles a day. A day, because the advertising value of those hits have come down from dollars to cents and sections of cents. So the economics of it are such that somebody doing serious journalism cannot monetize it to the extent. That's why they need subscriber base. New York Times, interestingly, in the age of Trump and fake news, with a huge catchment of 200 million people in the United States, and its power has improved its subscription income, and that's the support of people to say, I'm sick of this, I'm prepared to subscribe. I'm prepared to subscribe. So the paywall is working, but that will go to people who are prepared to, who want to pay. It won't go to the broader people who cannot afford to or don't want to. That's why public broadcasting in Australia, free to the corpus of users, every taxpayer of Australia, and everybody else, quite frankly, people who don't pay tax, it's available to everybody. A very strong argument for public broadcasting. But you're right, fact-checking, but eventually fact-checking will pick up with the viral element of misinformation and disinformation. The other thing that Alan Kohler said, to get to 200 hits a day, you need a hell of a lot of photographs of cute little cats, pussy cats.
Okay. All right. On that note, let's thank Quentin Dempster very, very much. Okay.